I suppose in a sense you're referring to the farm laws and the protests that we're seeing unfolding around us every day as an example of that, of what perhaps could be seen as policy by Jhatka. That actually, those protests actually bring together two strands of what you mentioned about what is perhaps concerning about the way that we are going about shaping economic policy. One, that you are not consulting enough stakeholders before you push something through. And two, the fear that the occasions when you do push policy through, it largely serves the interests of a few big business conglomerates. That's something that you hear very strongly in the rhetoric from the farm protesters. Whether that's justified or not is another matter. But both those strands are actually coming together with those protests.
Well, that's precisely the problem with policy that is not done with a greater degree of transparency, right? People believe the worst of you, and that creates even further opposition. I consult with some, farm experts, and they sort of believe that it's unlikely that some of these large corporate interests want to buy directly from the farmer, but that certainly is the sense. That this policy, may be targeted towards some of those interests. But I think more broadly, people say we need farm reforms, and I fully support that. We need to give the farmer a better deal, and part of that will be transforming the APMC Acts and transforming the role of mandis. But we also need to see what is working in the system right now. And different states have different degrees to which they rely on mandis. And so the issue is, how do we build on this? And often the answer is not so much one centralized policy with one size fits all, but more a decentralized structure where every state is enabled to do what is in its best interest, the best interests of its farmers. And you need to create more competition for the farmer's produce so that the farmer gets a more remunerative price. So the point is that some of these reforms, if they rolled out without sort of this kind of broader enablement, without the broader consultation, create a backlash that then actually makes it more difficult to do reforms down the line, because some of what you've proposed are very much what is needed, but without the envelope of other changes, effectively they are a non-starter.
Right. Now, on the question of this big business, this kind of the idea that you have these big crony capitalists whose interests are being served, while you're right to say that in the case of the agrarian sector, it may still be more nuanced. It's not entirely clear how genuine those concerns are. Overall, though, do you see that as a worry for the Indian economy? Because, in fact, in the paper that you and Viral Acharya wrote about the concerns over bringing in corporates into banking, you did mention that it might not be the most opportune time, given the fact that there's this concern around, these kind of oligarchies being formed.
Yeah, it is a definite concern. We have one of the strongest governments in recent history, and strong governments tend to attract, strong businesses who want to exploit their relationship with the government. So I think this is one place where the government has to continuously assert that it is not in a cozy relationship with a couple of businesses. And unfortunately, if you look at the growth of business, there are a couple of businesses that have done extremely well from this regime. Of course, you could argue the same thing of previous regimes also, but the problem becomes particularly sort of important when you have a strong government. So I think one of the greatest reforms which needs to be strengthened in the greatest reforms in the past was the Competition Commission. And what we need to do is have a much stronger view of antitrust, and not just antitrust sector by sector, but also the US version of antitrust, which is, this is the Brandesian view of antitrust, are these businesses big enough to influence the political arena? And if they're big enough, then we should be careful about them. That was what led to Glass-Steagall and cutting the power of the banks in the 1930s. It is what is now a wave against big tech in the US. These guys are just too big, just too powerful. And Mark Zuckerberg can, on the turn of a switch, change political preferences in the US. He is too powerful. Facebook needs to be cut down to size. There's bipartisan sort of consensus on that. And my sense is, for a democracy, you simply cannot afford a couple of businesses being overly large. You need much more competition amongst businesses.
Right.
And therefore, you have to worry about that.